Hi there, Lori Hanlon here. I will be your host for Knitting Next Door's Knit Along, featuring the Splatter paint pattern written by Shaina Bilow. This pattern is written for either a scarf or a wrap, and our Knit Along will last for 3 weeks as a social group with assistance as needed for this pattern. This is a very fun knit, and once you get going on it, it goes by very quickly because it's some different stitches in it. The purpose of this is just to briefly go through the pattern and get you set up ready to go. Before we start, let's talk about the yarn just a little bit. If you're going to make the scarf, you will need 1 skein of your main color and 160 yards of a contrast color. Most of the time the contrast color is a variegated yarn, but it makes a beautiful scarf or wrap if you use a lighter colored contrast color in just a plain color. There's a very pretty one on Ravelry. I would strongly suggest you look through the projects on Ravelry and get some idea of what it looks like. There are some gals that have used 2 different colors for the main color, and it looks just gorgeous. If you're making the wrap, which is twice as wide as the scarf, you will need 2 skeins of the main color. Whether you use 2 of the same color or 2 different colors is entirely up to you. But again, look at Ravelry and see how they use their color combinations. It's quite fun. The purpose of this video is just to quickly go through the pattern and give you some idea of what we'll be doing and how to read the pattern. So you will need to have your pattern either printed off or available on an iPad or whatever you use so you can kind of follow along. I have mine just off screen, so of course you'll notice my eyes going to the side as we look at the pattern. So let's get started. On page 2 of the pattern, you have your pattern notes, and these are always important to read through. Bullet number 1 lets you know that this is a bias scarf, and it tells you how the increases are made on the right side and the decreases are also made on the right side. Bullet number 2, the increase that will be used is a yarn over. And then when you come back on the wrong side row, you will knit through the back loop of that yarn over. And that is so it twists that stitch just a little bit and closes up a hole you might otherwise have in your scarf. Bullet 3 is quite an important bullet. This tells you how to carry your yarn up, because one of the wonderful things about this pattern is that you don't have very many ends to weave in, because if you follow these directions and carry your yarn up the side, you never have to cut your yarn. And therefore, all you have to weave in is the beginning and end of each skein. So to do that, I won't go through that right now because you will need to refer back to this section when you start using your second color. And I also talk about how to carry that yarn up in the videos, so you'll know how to do that. You've got your abbreviations if you're not sure of any of those pattern stitches. They all are fairly common stitches. And on the bottom of page 2, you begin your special stitches and the garter pattern. And this is a pattern that is used throughout the entire pattern. Anytime you're using the main color, you're pretty much using this garter pattern. So you're going to knit 2, yarn over, knit to the last 4 stitches, knit 2 together for your decrease, and knit the last 2 stitches. And then on the wrong side row, you're going to slip 2 with the yarn in front, and then knit across to the last 3 stitches, and you'll come to that yarn over, and you knit that yarn over through the back loop, and then again slip the last 2 stitches with the yarn in front. That's what makes your I-cord edging, and it makes a beautiful edging for the scarf. So because you're going to use this throughout the pattern, you probably want to keep page 2 available so you can refer to it quite often. Page 3 of your pattern gives you your actual instructions for knitting. So if you're making your scarf using the main color, you're going to cast on 50 stitches. If you decide to make the wrap, you're going to cast on 98 stitches. After that, the pattern's the same for both. You have a setup row, which will be a wrong side row, and then you're going to work 10 rows of your garter pattern. Those 10 rows will make 5 garter stitch ridges. And then you're ready to begin section 1, which is your knots section. The knots section is made up of a 4-row plus garter pattern repeat. So rows 1 and 2 are your main color. And if you will look at row 2, it says slip 2 with yarn in front, and then purl is written in all caps. You might want to highlight that or put a circle around it or something to help draw your attention to it, because you are used to, by this time, making that garter stitch section. And this is the same, except instead of knitting across, you purl across. So you really want to make sure you do that. It makes a nice setup for your knots section. So then rows 3 and 4 will be your contrast color, followed by rows 5 through 10, which are returning again to 6 rows of that garter pattern. So there are 3 ridges that you will complete. Once you work 1 through 10, you go back and you repeat rows 1 through 10 2 more times. That will give you a total of 3 rows of knots with the garter section in between, ending with those 3 ridges of garter stitch. Then at the top of the next column, make sure you notice rows 31 through 36. That's having you knit 6 more rows of the garter pattern. So all in all, you will have 6 ridges by the time you get done with that. 3 from the pattern repeat itself, and then 3 more ridges from this rows 31 through 36. I wish that were included at the bottom of column 1, because I don't want you to forget those. Those extra garter patterns set off each section quite nicely by giving you a larger section of garter stitches between each of your different stitch patterns. Section 2 is your mesh section, and note right under the picture, it says that row 1 decreases your stitches almost in half, and then row 2 returns those to your regular count. So if you're making the scarf, row 1, at the end of row 1, it tells you you will have 28 stitches on your needle. And if you're making the wrap, you will have 52 stitches on your needle. And then row 2 replaces those by adding in a yarn over between each of your stitches. And then rows 3 and 4 again return you to that garter pattern. This time you repeat just rows 1 through 4 11 more times. So you will end up with 12 rows of that colored mesh in this pattern. And then again, you finish off with 22 rows of garter pattern. So that makes 11 ridges plus the one at the end of your last repeat of the pattern. So you will have 12 rows of ridges again before your next section. And your last section is your star pattern. This time you start out with your contrast color. So rows 1 and 2, row 1 you knit across, and make a note to yourself on row 1 to knit those stitches a little bit loosely, because on row 2 you're going to have to purl 3 together, and you want to be able to get your needle into those 3 stitches quite easily. You purl 3 together, leaving them on the needle, yarn over, purl those same 3 stitches again to create your star pattern. And then again, rows 3 and 4, you return to your garter pattern, just those 2 rows, and then you repeat rows 1 through 4 a total of 5 more times, so you will have 6 rows of stars. And then finish off with, again, 22 rows of your garter pattern, which will make you 11 more ridges, giving you, including that last ridge of your pattern repeat, 12 ridges before the next section. Then you're going to go back to section 1 and repeat that whole section 1, 2, 3 2 more times. So you'll have 3 sections of scarf, and that's where it makes it easy to change color. Some people have used, if they're making the wrap, the main color plus a contrast for section 1. The second time through, some have used the 2 different main colors, and then section 3, they use the second main color with the contrast color. Makes a beautiful scarf. So just decide what you want to do. Then when you get those completed, you'll have 3 repeats of the pattern. Then you go back and work section 1 again, and that's your knot section. And you'll want to work that through, including what's marked as row 31 through 36, to give you the ridges at the end of the pattern. So it kind of matches the beginning of the pattern. And then you bind off. And I always block my pattern or my projects in water, and I let it soak for about 20 minutes to make sure that all the fibers get good and wet. Squeeze it out and lay it out to the desired measurements. And this one, I just gently pulled it so the edges were straight, pinned it real lightly, and then let it dry overnight, and it was ready to go. I always block it before I weave in the ends, just a habit I got into, but that's totally up to you. So I hope you enjoy this. I hope you will join us for each one of the sessions. The evening session and the afternoon session are basically the same. They're just both set up so people can join when they have time to. So I hope I see you all then, and enjoy this fun knit. Happy knitting!